As I start, I want to acknowledge something today, and this is very special for me. And I was discussing this with Sunil off stage, and I wrote about this yesterday. That the last time I came to Singapore 5 years back, I had to spend 3 months of my salary to make it here. And it is an absolute honor, privilege, and a grateful moment for me to be addressing you folks here. And it's extremely exciting to be here with someone like Sunil on stage. So as we begin, I want us to understand each other outside of work, and especially someone like Sunil, because everyone knows you're the CHRO of Gojek. But who is Sunil outside of work? What is your passion outside of work, if I may ask?
It's an opportune moment to ask me that question because somebody asked me, what are your hobbies? And I was thinking very hard about it, and I said, I don't have hobbies, I have micro-obsessions. So I get obsessed about like a thing for a period of time. And right now it happens to be mechanical watches. I was very, very fascinated by the fact that our entire civilization before the 70s ran on mechanical time and watches. So I'm studying how to build a watch, and I'd like to build one by the end of the year. So.
And how do you find time for this? Like, you're running like a company where there is $1 billion IPO going in parallel, and in parallel to that, how do you find time for this?
You make the time. It's not as fast as I'd like, the progress, but you find a few minutes here, a few hours there, and you invest in it.
Okay, understood. And we've been speaking about listening culture as a topic, right? And what I've mostly noticed is whenever I speak to any CHRO about a listening culture, they're always moving into an HRMS or moving in out of one. They're focused on performance appraisal, and they don't have time to focus on a listening culture. So why is it an urgent priority for you at Gojek to even focus on a listening culture?
Look, I mean, our vision is that all our people should feel inspired to do their best work every day. And a big part of making that happen is giving them voice, authorship, and agency, right? You're not going to feel inspired to do your best work if you don't have those three things. And listening allows us to enable that for people. And I think that's why it's important to us. That's one. The second thing is it's in our DNA. Our founders, from day one, always listened to our people. And that never really went away. It became entrenched in our culture and values. I'm curious about Infido and you. Like, why is this important to you?
I think it started when I was 18 years old, and that's almost 10 years back. And something that's always bothered me is most of us subconsciously accepted that Monday mornings are terrible. We've branded it as Monday morning blues. I don't understand why we're okay with that. And post the pandemic, I've noticed that every single day feels like a Monday morning. We struggle to wake up. And that's a problem I felt is worth solving for, because how do you really make sure that employees are inspired to come to work every single day? And that's just the employee perspective. I actually got the opportunity to speak to the ex-CEO of Great Place to Work. And Sunil, she said that every CHRO has the intent. And there's a plethora of employee engagement platforms out there. But have any of them really created a tangible, measurable impact? And when I understood these two perspectives, I felt it's worth it. I think it's worth diving into this space. It's worth taking out time to make sure at least 100 million employees feel like coming to work every single day. That's my why. But what I want to focus now on, Sunil, is some hard metrics, right?
Yep.
Because listening culture can sound very broad, very philosophical. What hard metrics do you have, some OKRs for your team, to make sure you actually create a listening culture?
So, we track all the usual stuff. We track engagement, we track retention, we track, time to fill, hiring, all of the usual metrics. I think those are hygiene. Anyone running a well-functioning HR team should do that. But we do a few other things. One is at each touch point in the employee life cycle, whether it's onboarding, offboarding, performance, etc., we actually poll our employees. Our employees are some of the most polled people on the planet, right? We ask them how they feel about everything, how they experience the process. We articulate in no uncertain terms what the objectives of the process are or that particular interaction is, and we ask them how they experienced it. And then we close loop. Listening is not just about asking people and then forgetting about it. It's also about closing loop. So we look at the feedback and we change our processes, we change our OKRs, we change our goals, and we iterate over it. And I think that's one thing. And some metrics we track, which may be unconventional. We track satisfaction score with interactions with the people team in Gojek, right? We saw a 45-point increase from last year to this year when we started tracking it, saying, these are the touch points you interact with our team on. How do you feel about this interaction? Did it meet your objective? Did you find that it was useful, etc.? And the same thing goes for all our processes. We listen and we track. Now, we do surveys and we poll, right? But it's each survey, each poll asks different things. It's listening for different things. So engagement is listening for how you're experiencing the flow of work, your experience at work. Our experience survey tracks that. We don't call it an engagement survey, we call it an experience survey, right? During onboarding, we ask people who've come on board new how they felt, if they have enough information, because we realize that that's the most important thing that people need in their first 30 days, 100 days, etc. Do you have information? Do you know where to go? Do you know who to talk to? Do you feel supported? Do you need help? So we listen for different things intentionally, and that helps us be super focused and respond to feedback. But we also recognize that, when surveys are one-sided, you can only answer the questions that are asked. But you may have feedback about things that are not in the survey. So we have anonymous forums that are just open, where people can ask any question they want, and it'll get addressed within 30 days or less, mostly within a week. So we really create an environment where people can ask questions and expect a response. My favorite moment of truth of this coming alive is our CEO does town halls every month. There's a heavy block of time set aside for employee questions, and those questions are responded to. It doesn't matter who it could be directed at me, another member of the executive team, the CEO himself. It could be on any topic. It could be on, hey, the not happy with my pay rise, right? It's a very common, very common question. Or it could be, what's the business strategy for the next quarter going to look like?
Right.
Or I'm not happy with these decisions on the product. And we honestly sit and answer those questions. And those we can't cover off in a town hall, we respond with an email.
I want to focus on one thing you just said, right?
Yeah.
And I've never heard of this before, that you change your OKRs midway. So like if someone shares some form of feedback in the town hall or as a part of your listening strategy, you have empowered your team to change OKRs midway.
Yeah. So listening to feedback is only effective if people are giving feedback, and people give feedback only if they know it's going to be acted on. So if you are so married to goals or OKRs that you've set at the start of the year that you're not going to have the flexibility to change course or change in response to the context of the environment, then people are going to stop telling you stuff. They'll be like, doesn't matter. You're only going to do whatever you plan to anyway. So our teams are empowered to. But the way we've structured our OKRs is, they anyway get reviewed every quarter. And every half year we set new OKRs based on new strategies. So
Got it.
That's the formal mechanism. But if mid-cycle we realize that there's this burning issue that is top of mind and is going to distract the entire company from all the other things, we're happy to drop OKRs, our OKRs as a function, and solve that problem and organize to solve that problem. And I think
I like that because you spoke about closing feedback loops, and I think that's very important because when you speak to most employees, right, their singular most important reason for not filling surveys or hating them is because they feel like nothing's going to happen. And I believe it's a lack of action fatigue and not a survey fatigue that employees face. And it's very critical to close those loops. Mm-hmm. But you also mentioned that you've switched from engagement to experience. And I think these are loosely used words out there. So how do you define experience for you? Like, what is experience?
So at a very conceptual level, experience is how effectively are you engaging in your flow of work. It could be with the resources you have, it could be with the relationships you have at work, it could be with the clarity of vision and direction, it could be your own energy levels and well-being. How effectively are you engaging in the flow of work? That is experience for us. We want to minimize the friction our employees experience as they go do the thing that they're good at, which is build amazing products, right? So can we remove as much organizational friction out of the way so they could go and solve those problems? That's what experience is for us. So the physical well-being aspect was never a focus for us till COVID happened and people were working remotely. And we started asking like mental health questions, like, are you feeling 100% there? We used a temperature scale. We said, what weather did you experience? Is it sunny, partly cloudy, except, just make it easier for people to relate. And we responded to those things. I think one thing that we did was we noticed during those polls that we did that a lot of people were feeling tired because of Zoom fatigue. There was back-to-back meetings. So we tried two things, right? Thing number one, we said every Friday will be a no meeting thing, and the last Friday of every month will be time off. Like it's a company sponsored day off. We did that for 4 months. It helped. The mood started getting a bit more sunnier, a lot less cloudy. But what we realized is, again, there was feedback that the holiday time off was stressful because now you had 4 days to do 5 days worth of work. So that holiday was stressful. So we said, okay, let's just move to a no meeting Friday. We actually removed the holiday. And that was in response to the feedback.
For any feedback to come to you, including feedback around this stress, right, I think the foundation for it is truth, right?
Yes.
And truth comes with a sense of honesty, comfort to even open up to you. Because what's the point of listening if the person in front of you is making up answers about what you want to hear? So how do you build trust required to even listen in the first place?
It's a chicken and egg problem, right? You need high psychological safety for people to give you honest feedback. And to get honest feedback, you need high psychological safety.
But at scale, right, with like thousands of people, how do you enforce trust?
You can't enforce trust. You win trust, you earn trust. And the way you do it is by being very deliberate and very clear and maybe even almost symbolically so that you will honor your commitment to a process. I'll give you an example. When we started doing the town halls and we said, this feedback culture didn't start magically, right? You had to force it a little bit. It was a forced learned behavior. So we had these town halls and there was no questions. And it became a one-way dialogue. A founder said, no, we want you to ask questions. So we enabled anonymous feedback. And we said, we will answer the questions, there are no consequences, and people didn't believe us. They're like, oh, my name's there, if I ask a difficult question, I'm going to be in trouble. We said, okay, we'll make it anonymous. And we made it anonymous, and we got a lot of incredibly difficult questions. That was step one, and then we answered the questions, we acted on the feedback that was there, we started responding to it, and slowly we encouraged a few employees to ask questions with their names attached. And then over time, we moved to a completely non-anonymous thing. We build psychological safety over time. We show with evidence, with our actions, that we value what people have to say and that we will act on it, and that built trust. It required us to be vulnerable as a management team. It's very easy to be there and get sniped at, right, for all your decisions. It required us to take those snipes and say, you know what, I understand where you're coming from. This is why I did it.
That's really interesting because I've seen a polarized set of CHRs, right? There are people who say anonymity is the way to go. And there are people who say that anonymity is actually like erodes trust, right? So there are two extremes, but it's the first time I'm hearing like a conscious strategy to start with anonymity and move away from it to gradually build trust. I think a very important part of that is for you to be able to hear that feedback.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to first convince yourself, but when I think you have a team of 150, 160 HR folks in Gojek, how do you train not just the HR, but the business heads, the managers, everybody to receive harsh feedback and make sure that they accept it the right way?
I don't think there's a single answer that works for everyone. What we did was role modeling. So our then CEO, Kevin, he took it on the jaw every time, right? Said, this is the feedback I have received about my decisions. This is what I think about this feedback. And he responded. And the town hall is attended by 3,000, 4,000 people, right? Like, this is not a small audience, and it's not intimate in any sense of the word. So there is a level of vulnerability that he made okay. And once his leaders saw that, they started replicating that in their functions. For the HR team, I think it was initially incredibly hard for my team to really hear difficult feedback about the processes we were running, right? And in such a public forum. It's not something people in culture organizations seek out actively. Rate us on our effectiveness. Oh, I just got like rated 2 out of 5. Your effectiveness is 0, right?
That's hard to hear.
So it's going to be stuff like that. How do you graduate from that? So and I think what I call it exposure therapy, which is you just keep exposing the team and making it okay for the team to say, look, this is not an indictment of you as a person or you or your work. This is just how we've received it. We need to design our processes and our workflows better. Let's just take it for what it is and design our workflows better. And over time, I think quarter over quarter, people started seeing things were getting better and they started giving positive feedback. That's nice to hear in a public forum. Like recently in a town hall, our learning programs were just lauded, like hundreds of people in the chat going, best learning company environment I've ever seen. So, and that felt great. And that was the result of 18 months of really hard, focused work of getting there, right? It feels great to hear the good stuff.
I've taken a mental note of exposure therapy. That sounds very fascinating. But what I'm not able to sort of like make up my mind on is, yes, we can do this for leaders, for business heads, for even the senior HR leadership. But I think we're in a time where, and I read this somewhere, that 58% people would trust a stranger more than their own direct manager. So how do you make sure that the middle management, the direct manager, is also getting this so-called exposure therapy?
It's we have a 360-degree process for feedback. So our managers are not the only people who rate their employees. Employees rate their managers' effectiveness as well. So we have different touch points. Our experience surveys ask about manager effectiveness, about leader effectiveness. Our performance review process asks for upward feedback. It's aggregated and it's anonymous, so your manager doesn't know who in the team gave what feedback. They just get an aggregate view. So there is an accountability. Like if you have power, you need to be held accountable, and the people who hold you accountable have to be the people you exercise power over. So we have that belief baked into the design of our processes. So we get really hard feedback, especially on vision and direction, because sometimes as a company at our stage, you pivot strategy very fast.
Right.
But we're also a large organization, so every pivot there's a human cost to it. It's like, oh, you have to drop a bunch of things, you have to pick up a new bunch of things. And when you get a low score saying, my leader provides clarity or a clear vision and direction, and you get like 20% of your team agreeing with that statement, that's very, very hard to hear, and it forces you to reflect deeply on how can I be doing this differently and better as a leader, right? How can I anchor my team to either a point of continuous change, or how can I maybe design a strategy that's not going to be so vulnerable to the forces of change, right? Maybe be more deep in my thought. It forces us to be better in every sense of the word, and managers as well. When managers hear feedback saying, most of my employees feel like I don't communicate clearly, something's wrong, I need help. The first thing when you hear tough feedback about yourself, first instinct is going to be defensiveness, and then after that, you're going to want to do something about it, right? So we try and nudge information to people at that point and say, okay, here's how you communicate more effectively. Here's some people, some mentors you can go to, here's some coaches,
right.
Here's some training programs you could attend. Our HR or people partners, as we call them, run active interventions with the team. They try to understand, when you say communication, what exactly do you mean? Right?
Understood.
So we do a bunch of things which is fairly interventionist to help people.
I like when you said continuous change, right? Because we're so focused on using words like continuous feedback, which is inward, continuous listening, which is inward. Continuous change is actually taking accountability of delivering on what you're listening. And the nuance I want to discuss with you, which is very special to you as a CHRO, is that I think just around the time when you joined Gojek, like there were about how many business units did you sort of merge together?
Dozens.
Dozens, right? So, and I'm sure those dozens of business units were across different cultures, different regions, right? And it's not just cultures and regions, it's, I think, a varied age group as well, right? So what's the age range, if I may ask?
Well, our median age is in the late 20s now.
Late
when
20s.
I joined, it was in the mid 20s.
Okay. So. And have you experienced like any challenges in assimilating the culture and listening to different forms of feedback when it comes from different cultures, different ages, different genders? Has that been challenging for you in some way?
Not challenging in listening to the feedback, and we do splice by demographics, right? We try and understand who's saying what, so we can be more surgical and precise in the way we respond to that feedback. What's been harder is, I think, some of the feedback that's driven by the cultures we operate within. Like We have offices in Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, India, and culturally, work shows up differently. Work interactions show up differently in those specific areas. Some cultures are direct, like Singapore. Some cultures are slightly more indirect, like Indonesia. How do you navigate those nuances, and how do you be relevant as you navigate those nuances while also ensuring that people are experiencing very similar things? That's the challenge. So designing interventions or designing responses that take into account the operating nuance the person is in is important, right? So I think that's something it's something we all have to get better at, and we continuously work on it.
Understood. And as we conclude today, I genuinely want to ask you, right, like, what I've observed is at least 75% of CHROs in Southeast Asia are still in the journey of figuring out their continuous listening strategy. What would you like to say 1,000, 2,000 people listening to you right now?
I think it's worth it. It's worth the investment. And my strong advice to any CHRO with any resources is please invest in a people analytics function, because you need that level of thinking and that level of precision as you respond to feedback. So you're not doing things in a blunt axe way. You have to invest and be data-led in your responses. So it's a commitment to being a data-led function and an evidence-based function. And some organizations are data-led and evidence-based naturally. Some organizations are led by narratives and stories. So you have to choose which one you want to be. And that's if it's a CHRO who's listening to this, that's what I'd say to them.
Nice. I'm so glad to hear that. And I usually love to end with a fun question, and I'm going to put you on this spot here. Is there something you believe in that most other people, most other CHROs disagree with?
I'm going to do the drinking cup water. I think there's a conflation between the concepts of meritocracy and fairness. The two things are not the same. If you say my organization is meritocratic, it doesn't automatically mean it's a fair organization. It just means you consciously differentiate for competence or whatever you give merit to. I think that's something that a lot of my colleagues tend to conflate as similar concepts. Like, we're fair and meritocratic. They're two separate concepts. So that's my controversial thought for the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunil. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming here today. Thanks a lot.